Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel. I'm codependent. I qualify to be here on many levels. Um, it's good to be back. I hope you guys all attended the first session because that's a big part of what's going to translate into my relationship pieces and how that happens. And I did send out some PDF information on workshops that I have done in the past that helps, that kind of goes along with what I'm going to talk about. And we don't really have to go through the slides, but you can refer to that later on and open them up. They'll be available to you, hopefully. And then you can kind of go through it and see some of the things that I talked about. There are workshops I did, it's probably been about 3-4 years ago, till we got all shut down and everything. But they're pretty relevant to the topic of the father wound and relationships and intimacy. And a lot of that stuff comes together. I believe one of them is the dysfunctional family, the rules and roles. So for my family, it's kind of toxic. The abuse was more my dad. I think I talked about that in the first session, how abusive my dad was, and the hole in the wound that I have from him. That played into my codependent self and how I developed myself. I have another one on intimacy that I do as well. And then there's there's grief, and then there is shame, guilt and shame, and how that binds us. And that all is relevant to how my codependent self really had developed, because I learned how to people please. I learned how to manipulate. I learned how that I could do things and be a certain way to be a certain person, and in the eyes of the person that I am with. So it's like wearing many masks, and I got good at that. And I think it really hindered my relationships because I could not let anybody get close to me. I'm going to read something right here real quick. The lost ability to develop intimacy. Okay, and this is a big piece for me because I never really developed intimacy until later, like when I'm in my 40s. So abuse is one. Trauma can be one way to lose the ability to develop relationships, where it be physical, sexual, verbal, or witnessing violence, neglect, your basic needs not being met as a child, food, clothing, the lack of shelter, messages from other people or caregivers telling you, boys don't cry, don't be a sissy. If you cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about. Your mom, and then you have your parents playing against each other where your mom doesn't love you, or she likes me better, and that's pitting everybody against each other. So that happens too as a child growing up. Being bullied. I was bullied a lot, and it's an environmental components as well, as we lose the ability to have intimacy because we develop. We don't know how to verbalize our needs, and so we kind of shut down pain, sadness, disappointment, hurt, fear, even joy and happiness. So we don't get the positive feedback and nurturing validation and direction that we need growing up. So that kind of played into a lot of my early developmental stages of having relationships. My relationships have never been equal. I've always been from a child's perspective, no matter what. And that's getting older as well. I'd have to kind of understand who the person was or is in my life and what they are in my life, basically. And then I could go from there. So always been from a kid's point of view in my eyes as growing up. That's my arrested development that I had that was so prevalent all up until I'm 40 years old. Um, we I think most of us develop that because it's something that we use to protect ourselves. And that's where the child is in control. And I think I spoke a lot about the inner child work, which is really, really a huge piece. A lot of the stuff that I did was inner child work. And I still do that too to this day because, more will be revealed. And it's revealed every day in my life. So I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way. And I'll let you know a little bit more about how I developed my relationships and how that translates from my toxic wounds, my father wound. But I don't only just have my father wound again. I have my mother wound. I have wounds that I have from what I had stated in here, being bullied or physically abused and stuff like that. So it really comes down to my self-worth of myself, intimacy. Being a sexually abused child, intimacy is really a big, big struggle because I don't know what that is. There's no trust that I know of that I can go by because my trust has been broken at an early age. But I do know I want to have that connection, but it's hard to when you don't have the trust. So I can only be kind of partially invested in that relationship, no matter who it is. Even though I want to, I can't because of my own self. I stop myself. And that's been the case in a lot of my relationships. So early on in my relationships in high school or junior high school, I remember my first kiss, and it wasn't my girlfriend now, but I'm sure she's listening. There was a girl in the neighborhood, and she was older than me, and she liked me, and I'm 12 years old, and I got it, and she kissed me, and I was all freaked out. Okay, I was freaked out. And I went, oh my God, no, that's not what I want. So, but it was the thought was nice, but the action felt wrong. Okay. And that's kind of the boundary piece that gets really disrupted with me at an early age. That boundary of like protecting myself when I know it's wrong had gone away already by that time. By the time I was 12, then it was like, I'm going to go along with it and it feels bad. So I have that knot in my stomach. That was kind of the early start of the relationships that I had, even though I liked the girl and everything, but it was just a kind of a bad experience for me. I wasn't expecting that. So that's like my first kiss, but I always wanted that connection, with the female, with the girls in the neighborhood and the girls I went to school with. I was very, very shy in grade school. I didn't talk much, and I did stutter a lot. Junior high, I really still wasn't really ready for that type of relationship or anything. But it wasn't until I got into high school that I really started to understand what I wanted in life. And what I wanted was I wanted that dream of being married and having a family and basically recreating everything that I didn't grow up in. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that until later on, because I was in relationship after relationship because I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to have it. I didn't know how to have allowed to be vulnerable. I didn't know how to share my feelings. Sharing my feelings today is still hard. I can do it here. But it's different when you're with somebody that you're very intimate with to share those feelings. That's been guarded. for me for a long time because of the betrayals that have come in my life by doing that. So when you come to an intimate relationship, it's really hard for me. That's my shame base. So my shame base doesn't allow me to be truthful. It doesn't allow me to be vulnerable. And so being wounded, that's kind of what I had to deal with starting in my relationships. I could people please people that I'm not going to be intimate with, but I'm going to have a relationship with. They're just going to be friends. I can give them the surface me, but I don't know how to let them know me. Okay, I can give them what they want and what they see, but I don't know how to let them know me. And that is a huge codependent trait for myself. That I developed at an early age because I needed my survival skills. That was what I needed to survive. So in high school, I started, it was probably the first time I really was in one school for a duration of more than a year. I was in my high school from 9th to 12. It was junior high and high school together. And I watched my mom and my dad have their relationship, and it was very dysfunctional. They didn't really show the affection to each other out in the open. My dad, it's my stepdad, I guess. When he'd get drunk, he'd play around like that, but never really that affection wasn't really visible for me to see and understand that. So it was kind of uncomfortable for me to have that type of relationship with somebody that I'm going to show, out publicly and this and that, but I could be there as far as reliable, dependable. If you need me, whatever you need, I could do that. But I don't know how to be affectionate and to show that to you, out in the public. And so that was something that was really foreign to me. It wasn't exhibited to me. It wasn't a model for me. So that was kind of confusing, I guess, for me having in a relationship, because the girls that I would have a relationship with, I have a slide in one of these, and I'm trying to remember if it was in the intimacy or if it was in, it is in the intimacy one. And it's called the relationships based on wounds. So when you're two wounded people, we recognize each other. Our energy is the same. And so being as codependent as I am, I'm a rescuer. So I'm going to fix that. And I'm going to, show the other side to that person that exists. And that's going to make everything better. Right. So finding, for individuals who are truly seeking long-term relationship, healthy romantic intimacy, the rush of the first love, okay, and that's what that is the catalyst that brings about the necessary boundary for sustaining the intimate attachment. Now, love addicts, I was a love addict, and this is really important here, because it's not the relationship that I really wanted. It's the fantasy of being in love. And that is the love addiction piece that I had that was really, really harmful in my relationship. So because now that I'm engaging in that first love, my endorphins are flowing. But when that ends, then it stops. And then I'm left raw and vulnerable. So that rush it's like, okay, now what? Basically, I'm in this, now what? Now what do I do? And I don't know what I'm doing. So because I don't have it modeled for me, and it's not explained to me, my parents never told me about that kind of stuff. I never learned it from anybody. It's just something that I had in my head as a little kid, that's what I want to see. I know that people have relationships and families, and I know that. But I didn't know that it was different from what I grew up in. It's not the same. So that piece for me is that I always would pick wounded people. And not intentionally. It's just that I'm drawn to that dysfunction because my family is this way, and then I'm drawn to that same energy. So I go to that, and that's how I levitate to. And um, I become the fixer, and I become the scapegoat. Um, and I don't really, I kind of sacrifice myself so that I can be the hero, basically. And we have, there's in the dysfunctional family information that I have there, I have that is what we come out with. Is a 6 basic roles as children. If we grow up in dysfunctional families or alcoholic homes or non-emotional, families who do not teach emotions to each other or feelings and stuff like that, we still develop our own sense of self, but it's not always a healthy self. So in my case, the basic roles that in my family that I grew up, it's the good child, also known as the hero. So, it's a child that assumes the parent role, basically. So me, I would help my mom out. I'd take care of my siblings, change the diapers, start cooking, at a very early age. So I learned all of that, and that's the people pleaser kind of thing. But not only that, I learned that I could be of use, and then I'm not looked at. They don't really see me. They see the work that I'm doing, which is a human doing, but I'm not me. I'm not showing you me. I'm showing you what I can do. And that is a huge piece in my relationships, because I don't know how to be present and intimate in that setting. So the other one is the problem child, the rebel, known as a scapegoat. Okay, a child that that's blamed mostly for the problems in the family or directed to me. And I played that role as well. You can always play all of these roles. We can all be all of these, but there's usually at least one of those in each family. And like when my parents were arguing and everything, I would always, intervene and act up or do something to direct all that attention to me, so that way they would stop fighting. And then I would be either the scapegoat, or I'll be the rebel by doing something bad. And it really is an unstable emotional state to be in, because I'm not sure where I'm at. The next one is the caretaker. Hopefully we can all relate to that one. Is that I'm going to take care of everyone's needs, be responsible for everything emotionally. Everyone's emotional well-being is I'm responsible. That's my caretaking role. And then I have to make sure that that's, again, most of these roles, I'm not present. I am lost of myself. I am playing a role. And the lost child, that's the inconspicuous one that's ignored, invisible. I'm a middle child. I am invisible to my parents, my brothers, and my oldest brother and my youngest brother, and those are the ones that got the attention, and I was invisible. Okay. And later on, when I talked to my mom about that, she said, well, I thought you were okay. I didn't know that you needed that. And that's an important statement, because I'm going to share with you the relationship I have with my kids, and that statement is there. And so that is a generational trend too. It can be repeated in generations. And I wasn't aware of that. I had no idea when I heard that from my mom. I was like, oh gosh, the mascot, that's the comedy that, using comedy to make light of everything and change the subject, and to kind of keep everybody laughing, so that they're not really seeing what is there. That's kind of the magician kind of thing, right? And then the mastermind, which is the opportunist, who capitalizes on the family members' faults to get whatever their needs are. So they can the object is to appease their own needs growing up, so they can manipulate. That's the manipulator, basically, how they can play both sides of the fence, and then but they're going to get their needs met.
Those are really the 6 basic roles. There are many roles that we play as children in that relationship, but all of these play out in our relationships, in our adult relationships. But as a child, that's kind of what I was, all of these, in fact. There's a critic. There's more in here, but there's other ones are the manipulator, the critic, daddy's little princess, mommy's little princess, and the saint. I have all of those in my family. My sister's a saint, and the princess, and mommy's little princess, daddy's little princess. But the problem with those ones, when you have the little prince or the princess, which is say dad leaves, and then you're the only child, the boy in the family, and you become dad now, you're mom's ally. You become the scapegoat for her, and so she invests her emotional need into you, and it confides in you an adult conversation which your child shouldn't be included in. That is actually harmful to that child growing up, because the boundary has been skewed, and it's not an equal relationship. So the boundary is crossed over, and it puts a lot of responsibility on the child. So that really is referred to as emotional incest. Enmeshment and emotional incest and intimacy, and that kind of really messes with you, because then you take on a role that's not yours. And I did that. I'm guilty of that too. It's like when I got divorced, I tell my 5-year-old son, I said, well, you're the man of the house, you need to take care of your mom now. Okay, that was terrible of me, and I look back on that and I got so much shame for that, because I that's how I grew up. Those are the messages that I got told, that you're the man, you got to do this, got to represent. But I took on that same role, so these are the messages that I had growing up. And so those are the developmental stage of my relationship. All of these are I'm just kind of going over these to kind of give you an idea of where I am emotionally and mentally trying to be in relationships. And that's what I'm hoping that you can kind of relate to a little bit, if you can see those pieces. How the kid in me is actually using those to be in that relationship, because I have no idea how to be an adult yet. And I'm an adult, I don't know how to be an adult. Yeah, so boundaries, loss of boundaries, that's a huge piece too, because the boundaries aren't in there. I don't learn in all of those roles. I don't know how to have any boundaries. And especially if you are the little prince or princess, I don't know how to have any boundaries either, because I'm expected to be an adult as a child. So for me, I that's kind of how I looked at it. And so I was a little, in my mind as a child, I was a little adult. Okay, I had already grown up, because I've already seen some pretty, mean stuff, pretty bad stuff. And I have survived it. And I'm here now. So I'm in survival mode. And that's from the kid's point of view. So in my relationship, that's what I carry into that relationship. Now in high school, I have so much shame, and I have a lot of girls that I really, really liked. I mean, I really liked her. One girl I walked to school every day. She was my neighbor. She lived down the street. I'd carry her books to school, but I felt just so good enough just to be her friend and to be there, that I had so much shame that I couldn't tell her how much I really liked her. And there was multiple girls that were like that. Of course, later on, when I seen them as adult, later on in life as an adult, and I would tell them that, and they go, "You dummy! I was so in love with you," but I didn't have any idea. I had so much shame that I couldn't get close to it. It would be, I knew that I could, but then I didn't know what to do when I was there. So, and that was the shame that I had, the toxic shame that I had in me, that I couldn't change that. So, I did have, I kind of want to fast forward into my marriages as an adult. my first marriages, and then I want to get into the relationships with my children. And those are probably the most important ones, and those are the ones that are probably that I'm not even probably, I know that they were the most important in learning what I needed to learn, and having that relationship with them still to this day, um, is priceless. And I had no idea that a relationship could be the way that it is. But my first relationship, my first marriage, I should say. I've been in many relationships already going up to this point. I've been up till I was 22. I had already been engaged a couple times, um, and I still was struggling because I didn't know how to even be myself in those relationships. But when I was 26 or 25, actually, I met a gal, and through, my house was the popular place. I had a pool, and I had the TV up in the corner with MTV going on 24 hours a day, and my house was a cool hangout, and so this gal, used to come, and somebody else liked her, and blah blah blah. But I liked her, and I ended up asking her out, and going out with her, and um, she was a good person, but I didn't know until years later that she had been sexually abused as a child. I mean, even a baby, a toddler, and she had severe multiple personality disorders. And in the beginning, our honeymoon period, and it was the same. It was just like what I explained to you. It was the honeymoon period where everything's good, and everything's all new, and we're trying to get to know each other. And then it comes to the part to where, oh crap, we're here 24/7. I can't hide anything. I'm exposed, and that's where the uneasiness, the intimacy, really wasn't there in that sense. I was operating more from I guess Spock, I guess, a factual, just kind of rational kind of sense of view. In being a man, that's how I operated. And then and she wasn't there in that sense. Hers was an emotional sense of being, and it was all over the place sometimes. Now there was times at night where she would be up walking around the house, and I'd get up and I'd ask, what's going on? What do you do? How come you're up? You okay? Everything's all right? Whatever. And she started talking to me, and she wouldn't even know who I was. And it was another personality. And that was just so weird to me, but I didn't, I thought, oh, she's probably sleepwalking or whatever. And I would kind of just talk to her, and then, and that happened for a while, but that marriage only lasted 3.5 years. We had separated in that time as well. And then it wasn't until afterwards that I found out that she had these issues, and that she was untreated. She didn't have any therapy, and I loved her. I did love her. It was my first marriage. But again, that was a marriage and a relationship that was based on wounds. And I understand it now. And I've been understanding it for quite some time. And before she passed away, we were able to really kind of make amends to us, and understand how we were. We were both, it wasn't just her. We were both sick, wounded individuals looking for something. And we found each other. And it wouldn't have worked. It didn't work with anybody. Okay. It didn't work with, no matter who I found, and no matter who she found, it didn't work with anybody, because it's an inside job, and I needed to fix the things that I needed to be able to have a relationship in the first place. But we had 2 boys, my 2 sons, Dylan and Jason, and I just have to think that that's the universe saying that this is where, this is who I needed to be at that time. And I have some children from that. And I love my children. They're awesome. Right? My kids are great. Um, my second relationship is with my daughter's mom, and I was with her for almost 8 years. And we met in a bar. I had just finished playing a softball game. Surprise, right? You meet in a bar for some reason. I finished a softball game, and she was there playing pool with her cousin, we were joking around. We were playing pool, and betting beers or whatever. And then he says, "Well, I'll bet you can go out with my cousin if you beat me, or it costs you a couple beers or whatever." So yeah, I ended up beating him. So I ended up going out with her, and and again, it was the same cycle. That honeymoon period, we got together. We ended up moving in together. I had my boys at the time. She had a little boy, my redheaded stepson, Marcus. Literally, he looks like Alfred E. Newman, and he was my thorn in my side. But I love him. I loved him. I don't have much of a relationship with him today because that's his own doing. But that relationship was very one-sided. It was always her way or nothing. Okay. And I'm trying to be present in this relationship and hang on to whatever I think that I have. And, and it finally, after years, I've struggled. She never wanted to get married. She didn't want anything to do with that. And, she had another little boy, Nathan, and he was a baby at the time, and Nathan's dad had really kind of scarred her, and so I found out that he took the baby away from her, and divorced her, and that really kind of put a wound on her. And then I also found out later on that she was wounded, that she had been raped before, and that her one child was a product of that as well. And so she had these wounds, and she was not ever going to go get therapy. And so now I understand why she was so rigid and everything. But then again, here I am again present in this relationship based on wounds. And I don't see that. I don't see it because I'm going to be the knight in shining armor once again, and not knowing that I can't change anybody. I can't change it. I'm in that struggle most of my life. I can't change anybody. I can't make anybody be any different than what they are, no matter what I do. Even though I could be the best husband in the world, and it's still not going to change that person. And I don't realize that. I didn't know that. So that relationship ended. After a while, we were just not cordial with each other, and so we finally just we split up. My daughter was like 3 years old when we split up, and so now I'm a single again, and I have my two boys and my daughter, and actually my stepson too. I took her boy with me because she needed to go do something, I don't know, whatever. But so I raised him for a few years as well. And that was I look back on that, and I realized that there's a lot of part of that I was not a good dad. I was the drill sergeant again. And I didn't realize that I was still wounded through those relationships. I got married again. I actually was in another relationship, a couple of relationships, which were short. They didn't last very long, for the same reason. And then I got married again to the boss's daughter. I don't suggest that, but again, I think I described her. I think I talked about her in the last time, and she was from Tennessee, and she had that nice voice, the southern draw, and all the goodies, and the blonde hair and green eyes, and the body and everything, right? All the exterior stuff that a shallow man like me would like. And then what really that was the beginning of my recovery, really, to meet her, and that's why she was in my life. But when I realized that I was not present and I was a human doing is that when she pointed out to me that I could not just sit on the couch with her and watch TV and just talk about things. I didn't know what to talk about. I had no idea what I'm a human doing. I know how to produce and do things, and I work is what I do, workaholic, and so I couldn't do that. So that's when I went into recovery and found out I'm an alcoholic addict and a codependent and adult child and much many more things than that, but also a wounded child, and that was kind of a huge piece. That's when I started working on all these things. So this is where I really have to learn how to have relationships, because what depends on this is the welfare of my children and my relationship with my children. And this is the time when everything comes together. Okay. So, my kids, I went through, all of them have gone through a children's program at Betty Ford Center where I went to get sober and clean. And ironically, I found out I'm a codependent as well. One of the gals that were going through that program with me was only codependent, and she went codependent, and she was not an alcoholic addict, but she was an enabling codependent. And so she went through for codependency, and ironically, I learned with her and having in group with her and sharing the similarities that I had so much with her, and the background growing up, it was very similar. So that's kind of where I started understanding my lack of relationship skills, I should say, is in that group with her. So and then so in that group setting, I started learning how to be vulnerable and how to really say what was needed to be said in my emotional self, and finding that emotional sobriety part of myself that I needed, where the wounded self shuts everything off. Okay, I'm going to shut you down. I'm going to divert everything because we're not going anywhere near anything that's painful. And, at the cost of a relationship, at the cost of friendships. So this is where I started learning how to have and be open and accepting of criticism, feedback, because if you're like me, you don't want to hear any of that. And then learning how to be honest with what I'm feeling and where I'm at, and how the helplessness that I felt. That was kind of the beginning of the building of my relationship skills. I believe I shared with you the event I have. I'll go over real quick, where my children, my boys at the time, they got to have a say with me, and they told me how much they hated me, and they didn't want to live with me anymore, and the fear that they have of me. It's still painful, because then I'm realizing that I know all of those coping mechanisms and survival skill mechanisms that I have, they're not working. Okay, and they're not working for relationships, and this is why I'm at where I'm at. So I did learn how to have a relationship. I was in an AMAC group, and that's the adults molested as children. My beginning is the relationship I had with the women in that group. They taught me, I was in that group for 9 years, and they taught me non-sexual intimacy, something I had no idea that was possible, and to be close and be verbal and to be vulnerable. And I could never do that with women. And it's still hard today to be vulnerable in that sense with women, but it's necessary. Okay. I'm an open book. You just have to ask, that's kind of where I'm at today. Um, I set a boundary, and my boundary is if there's private things, unless you want to know what those are, then we can ask me. I'll tell you all about it or whatever. Or you can come on here and listen to it while you'll hear it. But it's different when you're one-on-one with a person. I can tell you guys all this stuff, and I can relate to you, and tell you all of my things that I got going on in here and everything. But when you're sitting next to somebody who you're emotionally, intimately, and sexually attached to, and it's hard to have that vulnerability. Okay. On their side too, as well, because they too have been wounded and betrayed. So there's still a gray area, even as many years of therapy and workshops and all the things I do. There's still that gray area that's uncharted territory. Okay, because I haven't experienced some of that yet, and I have to learn how to have that dialogue. But I'm open to it. I'm not shut down like I was before, where I would just get mad and everybody's miserable now because dad's mad. So that's in that group with the women, I was able to do that, because they would be honest with me and tell me things. And, and I know what their wounds are. And I knew, what the predators had done to them, and how they feel about men. And so I had to get a different relationship with them, and they had to get a different relationship with me being a man. As a child, men were my abusers, whether it's my dad, the abusers that sexually abused me, men who, beat on me. But then in my relationships, women were my abusers because of their wounds and the walls that they set up, and, lack of trust and intimacy for me. I got dumped on, I guess, so to speak, so I got the bad end of that. So I kind of knew what that was like. So in this group, I'm kind of understanding that I did the same thing. And the girl, so I learned with the women, how to be vulnerable. And that was really, really one of the hardest things that I've ever come across, but the best. I don't think I would have learned it with the men. I did learn it with the men after. I don't think I could have learned it with the men first. So I learned it from the women. And I have this thing. I'm female dependent, and I'll share a little story with you. I was attending a meeting. We had a weekly meeting, alumni meeting, at the center. And there was a gal that ran it, June, God bless her soul. And there was 3 gals that ran it, and they were just beautiful girls. She was an older lady, and I just loved being around them and their stories. And so we'd sit there, and the meeting after the meeting was a speaker meeting. And then every day every time after the meeting, they would say, "Hey, why don't you come coffee with us?" and everything. And I'm going, wow, I'm getting invited by these beautiful women to go get some coffee. Right. And so I said, okay, yeah, let's go do it, and that meeting, I would bring my daughter with me, she would come with me because I had my daughter. I had nowhere to take her. So she was 4 years old at that time. And, I have to dress her up in little, all her little cute little dresses and everything, and frilly little dresses that she hates that now. But, so they saw me as a dad. Basically, that's what I was. And then, so they always invite me to coffee, and then they would suggest to me, June would say, "Hey, you know what? You should come to this meditation meeting with us, and then she would, different functions. And then she'll say, "Hey, you should secretary this meeting. It'd be good for you to secretary this meeting and everything." And so I went along with all of that, because I'm female dependent. They're going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do that. Okay. That's what I did. I didn't realize I've done that most of my whole life. Okay. And they were great. They were examples. I'm trying to remember the term. I'll remember it here, but they were my examples. I wanted what they had, And I started doing everything that they would, tell me to do, and like on and on and on. And then I started developing my own self, and they went off doing their own things and stuff. But I'd still be in touch with them and see them at a regular time and meetings and stuff like that. And then I was secretarying another meeting, and then I had June come to speak. So can you be my speaker? You lead the meeting. She goes, oh yeah, sure. And then she was sharing and everything. And then, you know, I said to her, I go, I just love my relationship with you girls and blah, blah, blah. I tell her all about it, how I appreciate what they did for me and all that. And she tapped me on the shoulder. She says, oh, honey, she said, we loved you. She said, but we know what girls are out there. And we knew we wanted to keep you away from the sick ones. So you were our little project. This is what she told me. You were our little project, and we kept you busy. And look how good you turned out. And so, but you know what? She said, we saw you, and we knew what you were, and we wanted you not to go to get hurt. We didn't want you to go through things that you didn't need to go through. And I learned that from them. And ironically, I'd turn around and learn and teach this to the men, because I think I had to learn from you women what I needed, because I'm an emotional male that couldn't be emotional. I wasn't allowed to be. But I needed to be. And so Eskimos, they were my Eskimos. That's what they call them. Something that's very prevalent and important in your sobriety, that kind of made you go in a different direction for the better. So they were my Eskimos, and that's what they were in my life. So this is kind of the beginning in my relationship skills, is how to develop those relationships. And, my tears are, she passed away last year, and my tears are just of gratitude and being fortunate that I got the best. I got the best of some good people, and I appreciate that. And she taught me, how to do for others, how to be of service, and how to have a mutual non-sexual relationship with a woman. And I actually like that. I like that better, because I feel that the friendship and the relationship part is the most important part. The intimacy is going to be, that's an intimacy. That's non-sexual intimacy. That's the best in the world. Eventually our physical intimacy will die off and, cease to exist, but we're going to have each other and have that relationship. So that was kind of the beginning and the opening of my relationships with women in intimacy. The really important stuff that started with my kids was being able to be vulnerable with my kids. And it wasn't easy, because I had to actually show them that I could be kid-like and allow them to joke around and allow them to make fun of me, and to allow them to feel okay and to feel wanted and to feel safe. And they didn't feel that with me, and it didn't matter what I tried. It's just that they were afraid of me. So that was kind of an important translation for me, to learn that for my kids, and that's what they helped me on, is to have that relationship, to learn how to be a kid and be on the level of my kids, so that they can relate to their dad. Okay. So later on, I'll fast forward here to one incident where my kids have all had their struggles, and I've kind of been there. I've been there for them. And I've told my kids in the beginning, I said, look, Yeah, I said, we're not going to be a family that holds secrets. We're not going to be a family that doesn't talk to each other. We're going to be a family that helps each other solve each other's issues. And then if we have them, then we need to deal with them. And that's what I want for my children. And this is exactly what I told them. And I said, this is something that I didn't grow up with. Okay. I didn't grow up with this. My relationship with my mom is totally different. And I'm going to explain some of that with you here in a minute. And so that's kind of our journey. My journey with my children from 99 on was is that we are not going to hold secrets. You're sick as your secrets. Family secrets are what keep everybody sick in the whole family. So there was a big learning process. My son, my oldest boy, Dylan, he said, "Dad, I want to have a talk." And I'm like, "Oh God." I knew this is coming, and I really welcomed it, but I was feared it. Okay. I feared it because this is something that I didn't have with my parents. I did with my mom later, not too long ago here. But I said, sure, whatever you want to know, I'm gonna answer it as truthful as I can, as painful as it may be. And he did. He had questions. He had questions of why, he had questions about his mom and his resentment towards me that was there for a long time. When he was 12, for a while then on, he didn't want to spend time with me. But and this is what that dialogue was about. It was about his mom, and he was resentful about his mom. He was resentful of me. He didn't understand why I didn't do. Why didn't I keep them? Why didn't I? How come they didn't grow up with me all the time? They ended up going back to her, and her being the multiple personality disorder, she suffered from chronic depression, and she would isolate in a room for a couple of weeks at a time, and my son would be there taking care of his siblings. And I was helpless to tell him I couldn't do anything. I tried. I went years to go to court to get you guys. That's what I told him. And I said, I have to do what the court tells me, and I can't do anything other than that. I said, I just try to be there for you guys. And I said, and then he asked me about. He told me about his life with his mom and the things that he went through, and those are painful to me still. I could not save my kids from that, but we moved through that. And then he asked me about my daughter's mom, because he grew up with her, and for that most part, and he was with us then for him and his brother were for a while with us then, growing up, until she got him back. And then I had to explain to him who she was and the things that she went through and the things I went through, and I had to explain to him that I didn't have any role models. I didn't have any men figures to tell me how to be a dad, how to be husband, how to be vulnerable, how to be this. I said I had sick, wounded men who all they could show you was anger and rage and control and manipulation. And I said, and I didn't want to be that, but I understand I was, trying my hardest not to be it when you don't know how to be nothing else. And that's it. So and then I flat out told him, I said, I was sick and I wasn't well, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just had an idea and I couldn't reach out for help and ask anybody because I didn't want to look bad. And so that's kind of where I was. And he looked at me and he said, I could work with that, Dad. He goes, I want our relationship to be different from here on out. And it is. It has been. It's been incredible. I don't think many parents get that topic or get that discussion with their kids. I'm glad I did. I never got to have it with my dads. But it's an understanding that I understand them, they understand me, and they can be who they want to be. I don't want them to be anything else but what they want to be. Now, my daughter was the second one that came to me, and she was still in college at this time. And she's the one most like me. She's very stubborn. And she's right most of the time. Yeah, she's her father's daughter. Okay, we are two peas in a pod. And she says when she was 14, I was like, I became an alien. I became some, she was angry with me as hell. She went through college and, she would get mad at me. And she said that she wanted to have this conversation. She wanted our relationship to be better and to be different. And I said, okay, I'm good with that. And she goes, okay, I want to have this talk. And, I want to sit and talk with you. And I said, I understand what you want. I go, but here's what I'm going to say. I said, I will have this talk with you, but we need to have a mediator in the room because, you are me and you're too much like me to have our conversation and be mutual about it. And I said, so I'm okay with having a mediator. And I said, I'm okay with you picking that person. It could be anybody you want. And she said, okay. So she picked her older brother who had already went through this with me. And we sat down and we started talking and she started talking. And it wasn't really talking. It was, you did this and you did that and you weren't there and you were gone. And my son stopped her. He said, okay, time out. First of all, you're attacking Dad. And that's not what this is about. We want to know what we need to do to fix what we got going on and take it from there. So let's change that. This is my son. I didn't have anything to do with it. This is what he said. And he said, so he directed her and say, how about I statements and the things that really hurt you or what you're disappointed in or what you wish for or what you hope for. I was kind of flabbergasted at that time. I was like, oof, okay, I like it. It's rubbing off. I don't have to do anything. So she started in and her mood changed. It went from like attacking and it went to the vulnerability and the tears came out. And she started telling me she started saying, well, you weren't there for this on my graduation, or not my graduation, when I went to go, you didn't want to go see my dorm room. And, it was all about her school. And then he said, okay, I'm going to stop you. He told her he's going to stop you right now. And I'm going to ask Dad something. He said, Dad, what do you feel about that? What do you think about that? And I said, well, I was kind of hurt too, because I wasn't asked. Okay. I felt that you and your mom had just taken over and you guys are doing that. And I wasn't asked to be invited and part of that. So that's kind of how I feel about it. And that kind of changed the mood because she never did ask me. And I was hurt from that too. So it was kind of a little while, it went back and forth. And then she kind of broke down in tears at the end of that. And what came out of that is that her mom was alcoholic, badly alcoholic, and she was the youngest in her family there with her mom, her brother, and her, and she was taking care of them. And so this pattern of children taking care of their adults. That's me, that was my son, and now it's my daughter. Okay, um, so it really, what it came to is it wasn't about me. It was about her mom. And the same thing with my son Dylan is it was about his mom. But I was the only person that was safe enough for them to direct that at. And that's what we came out with. All of us came out with that. And so we have an understanding. We had long discussions of topics on that, even to this day. And I tell him, I says, you know what? I said, I loved your guys' mom. I was in love with them. Okay. I mean, how could I not be to have you guys? You know, I wanted things to work. It just didn't work. You know, it just couldn't happen. It just didn't happen. It had nothing to do with you guys. I don't want you guys to feel like that or anything, but you guys you're a product of love, and I love you, and I'm always going to love you. And so those are my two. My second oldest boy, I had my conversation with him. He's more of an intellectual guy, and he's more Spock than I am. But he's the rager. He has my rage, and he's anger, and he's stubborn, and he won't go get some therapy because he's going to read it in a book, and he's going to learn how to do that. And I'm watching him make his own mistakes right now. I'm letting him live his life. I'm detaching with love. I call him or text him or whatever I need to do to be connected to him. And it's not like we don't like each other or love each other. We do, but he's got to go through his own stuff, and he's going to deal with it his own way. Like telling an addict, "Hey, you got to go put yourself in, rehab." That's not going to happen. So I have to just love him for who he is and let that go on and let that play out. So that story is still out. That's still going on right now. So my relationship with my kids are, we talk on a weekly, daily basis sometimes. They're very techy and nerdy. Which I'm thankful for, because they got careers. My daughter just is a teacher now, and full-time teacher, and so she's teaching. And my son, he just got a promotion, and he's making a lot of money. He's making double what I make. So so that makes me happy that I don't have to worry about them in that sense, and I just take care of myself and be present for them. So those relationships are really, really huge for me, and I'm trying to have those in my adult relationship now. I just a few years ago, I was in a relationship. I don't know if it's a midlife crisis because I was in my late 50s, but maybe it's later life. For me, it's middle life, I guess. Not, a biker. She's like a biker girl, and I was 57 and she was 35 at the time. And she didn't know how old I was. I didn't know how old she was. But anyhow, that relationship was not at first an intimate relationship, but we ended up like, hey, we want to go spend time with each other because you got this, and I got kids, and I don't want anybody a part of that, and I got work, and I'm busy, and I need to take care of that, but I want to go out and have fun every now and then. So that's how that relationship started. It was purely not a intimate kind of a relationship at first. But it ended up, I was just taking it for what it's worth. But again, I think the universe has a lot of direction for people, and to put people in my lives for certain things. And we ended up being really, really close friends. We were intimate. I experienced a lot of different things with this girl, the freedoms of self, freedom of not being shamed by my body or my sexuality or my nakedness. just be free and to be okay and okay with that. Where I wasn't okay with that. Okay. I don't want you to see me. Okay. Um, Spiritual freedom or spiritual sexuality. Yeah, at 57, I'm starting to learn how to do that. And that's kind of what I learned from this girl. And what happened is that we were not really on a path to be together, but she lives somewhere else now, and we still talk. And she thanked me because she said that I opened her eyes to a lot of things of dysfunction that happened in her family that was happening at the time, when she was still here. And she was, drinking a lot and everything. She's not now. And she's trying to change that pattern in her life. And that she saw how I was, not, just sober, and how spiritual and how free I was. And, and I explained to her what she has done for me as far as that part as well. But I've never experienced that type of freedom with myself. That was the hardest struggle in my life, was having the sexual intimacy in playfulness. Okay. Playfulness, or it's just okay. It doesn't matter. It's not, it's really a mutual trust. It's a freedom. And I never experienced that in my life. And I learned how to do that with this girl. So I at my age, I'm still learning. And I think it's something that I needed. It was more, will be revealed to me. And that was a big piece of that, because I never knew what that was. My whole life, I didn't know what that was, but the sexual pieces of my intimacy, being from a wounded child, a molested child, were totally different. And it's helped me see a different light and freedom from that. And it's a spiritual freedom, to be able to be open like that. And so it's still a little uncomfortable sometimes, but it's very rewarding. And I think that's probably really the closest that you can be to somebody, when you can be like that. I want to tell you, I'll tell you a story about my relationship now, and then I'll tell you, are we having a break here soon, or do we know? Or
Okay, we're back. I hope everybody had a good break. I did. I was chatting with my girlfriend. So, where she is. Anyhow, okay. So I wanted to tell you about the conversation I actually had with my mom. Now, my mom is 80 now, and she hasn't been good health-wise. She has some health issues going on. And she's surrounded by my dysfunctional siblings, my sister and my oldest brother. And, I can't do anything about that. I have to just give that over to my higher power and allow the world to do what it's going to do. And I just be present when it's necessary for me to be present. But I was up there in LA, and my mom and my sister are not really on good terms because of her husband. And we were having a conversation about my stepdad, who's passed away, and the things that I had, my issues that I had with him. And one of the topic with my mom I told her, I said, I had a lot of issues with him because he didn't acknowledge me like I was a son. He couldn't bring himself to do that, and then plus he wouldn't, the positive affirmation wasn't there either. So that relationship where he wouldn't say, oh, you did good, you did good, son, or whatever. So He would never do that. And he couldn't do that to me, but, with my wife, he would tell her all about me, how I did all these great, wonderful things, but I would never hear it from him. So that was kind of a disappointing part for me. And then the other part is how I told my mom how, the reason why I picked him up and was bringing him out here to golf with him is because I was mad at him because of that he didn't treat me like a son. And then I ended up ultimately, he's in the beginning of Alzheimer's, and coming back and forth, I learned a lot about him because he would tell me all these stories that he probably didn't realize he was telling me, about the abuse he suffered as a kid and all the things he went through. So I learned that, he was a wounded man, and he did the best he could. And so I was able to kind of get over some of that stuff. And then the other part was that I shared with my mom is I said, he was not very affectionate. And I said, I was kind of mad that he would not be an affectionate guy, as liked as he was. And then my sponsor told me, well, what's wrong with you? I said, my dad, he never hugs me or whatever. And he says, well, why don't you hug him? He goes, that seems like the problem. The problem is you're not hugging him. That's what's wonderful about sponsors, is they always make it back to you, that it's okay, what are you doing? Not rather than what he's doing, it's what you're doing. So that's when you got a good sponsor, by the way. If you know that, that's when you got a good sponsor. So my task was for my sponsor was to hug him, was to start hugging my dad. So as I would see him, I'd say, hey, Pop, and then I would hug him, and I would give him a hug. And, at first it was like the hug with the arm straight down, and then it was the one-handed pat on the back hug, and then eventually he started hugging me and acknowledging him. And then he started doing that with everybody and stuff. So I just think that was a piece that was foreign to him that he didn't know either, so I think I helped him as well. So when I was explaining that to my mom, she says, she's realizing now, and now this is codependent, how my mom is codependent, and everything I talk about comes back around, and it's on her, it's her fault, or somehow it's about her. When I got mad at her and I told her how I was sexually abused, or, all that stuff, her response to that was, oh my God, I was a terrible mom, and I allowed this, and so it wasn't about my abuse, it was about how terrible a mom she was, So I had to explain that to her, and then I was explaining to her about, hugging my stepdad, and then she said, oh, well, you know what? That's my fault too, because I wasn't very affectionate. I didn't show you guys affection, and I didn't teach you how to do that. And I just let her do that. Okay, I let her take that responsibility instead of saying, well, it wasn't really about you. But I let her go on, and then so she had said that she never did. She never let us see her cry, and she didn't really hug us a lot. It was the pat on the back hug. So I always had a question mark about myself too. Why am I not lovable in that relationship? So which translated to my female relationships, right? We say we marry your mom, that kind of thing. I've been marrying my mom, who was unavailable all these years. Okay, go figure, right? They don't know how to express themselves. So, did you like that? So anyhow, and then the topic came up. It was about. Let me see. Well, one of it was about my sister, and she brought up this thing about how my mom would come out and visit my brother, and I would live about a mile away from them, and they would never come see me. They would call me and tell me an hour before they're leaving, hey, we're going to be leaving. We're out here. We thought maybe you want to come visit. It's like, you're out here all weekend, and now you're telling me this, And so that's kind of how my relationship was with my parents, with my mom, stuff like that. So I've always felt like a second-class citizen in my family. I am not that now. Now I'm the brainchild now. I tell you, I feel way better about myself than that. And she was bringing up about all the stuff that kind of like I've been excluded against, in our lives. And then I asked my mom, and she said, yeah, I recognize that. And I said, yeah, you helped all my siblings with I mean, big financial stuff. And me, I got nothing. I never got anything. And I said, what? Why? What's going on with that? And you know what she said? She said, because I thought you were okay. You were always a survivor. You always came out, did what you needed to do. And you didn't look like you needed it. When she said that, I remember saying that with my son. Very same thing. When he asked me, how come you
me like that, Dad? And I said, because I thought you were okay. And I remember I said that I would have that. Something came up here. So I repeated the same thing. She repeated the same thing back to me. And so this is something that's in my family dynamic, that I'm kind of recognizing the inability to be able to really recognize who we are in our family. But we have deeper conversations now with me and my mom, and we're on a different level of understanding. And I am okay. I did survive. I learned how to survive. I learned how to put trust in other men who helped me and other women who have helped me, and allow people to get close. I'm in a relationship now with a girl that grew up with, I guess, from the neighborhood that I grew up in 42 years later. She actually was my first love. I was her dad's paper boy. I always tease her. I say she was like this in the window waiting for me to deliver her paper. But she was a little younger than me. But then as things progressed, I actually became an adult, legally adult, and she was younger than me. So that wasn't going to be good. So I ended up breaking that off, which was actually a good thing, because then we probably would have ruined that friendship for good. Now I've been friends with her sister for a long, long time. And so her sister told me to get a hold of her, through certain channels. And I did. And then, of course, 3 years later, she texted me back finally. So she wanted to make sure I was still there waiting for 3 years. I think she was punishing me. So we started our relationship, and it's been an experience, and it's been a good experience. It's been a learning curve for me, to be able to really talk about uncomfortable things and be open to talk about uncomfortable things. I told her in the beginning that the most important thing to me is the relationship. And that's what I would want to nurture, is the relationship. Now she's on a different, she has a different thought process than I do. But we're both codependent. We're both like things the way we like them. And we're learning how to coexist with that. So I learned how to pick my battles. I go back and kind of regurgitate up the stuff my sponsors tell me about what's important, what's not important, to complain about or to do, or if do it yourself if it bugs you. But I think for the most part, we were kind of on and off. we went out, and then, then we stopped seeing each other for a few, I don't know if it was a month, maybe in weeks or months. And then she said, well, I can't just be friends and this. And then it was, okay, well, I can't not be friends. And then, and then she came out with the shoulds. And this is what should happen when you like somebody. And then so I kind of explained her the shoulds that I got when my sponsors explained the shoulds to me, that's like they're shooting on you, and that shouldn't happen. And so I kind of explained that, they said, should, that sounds like, what that sounds like, right? And so I said, yeah, that's what he taught me, and that if it's that way, it needs to be a mutual conversation in how someone sees it and how you see it and what's the reality of what you're seeing and why. So that's not usually where I come from, but that's kind of where I'm at now. So I have to remember to stop and pay attention to that. And I set boundaries with her, and she's setting them with me, which is good. I'm welcome to that. I like that. We got in an argument, and she went on a vacation for a little while, but we learned a lot about that, and I learned a lot, and she learned a lot, and it's about the communication and what our expectations are. And I don't really want expectations, so I'm trying to just work and be present and open to what what is in our relationship now. We've had arguments, and then we're learning how to actually take those arguments and turning them into discussions. And I think it's uncomfortable. I know it's uncomfortable for me, and I'm hoping that it's uncomfortable for her, because that way I don't want to be the only one uncomfortable, that we can actually come to a common ground and discuss things that we need to discuss as past, present, and a lot of that actually has to do with feelings, because I think most of my experiences have some feelings attached to them, and not to project anything onto her or have vice versa. So this is kind of a learning experience. It's a good experience. I welcome it. I'm present. I love her. I think we're good together. I just know that I have to be in my side, and I have to be present in my program and take care of my recovery, so that I can be available and useful and present in her life. And I'm still learning, because I haven't had that yet. I've learned how to do it, but I haven't had it. Okay, so I'm having it now. She comes out here and stays with me for sometimes a week, or the weekends, and so we're learning how to. I think she's learning just as much as I am on that it's okay to have conversations and to be okay. Like, it doesn't have to be an argument. It's not an argument. It's a conversation of, are my expectations real, or maybe it's just to listen to certain things. I feel I hope I've gotten better at doing that. I try to stay away from telling her what she should do or not do, because that's not my place anyways. My place is to just say what I see or how I feel, and that's kind of basically it. So so after 42 years, we've been seeing each other for, well, almost 3 years, right? Yeah, almost 3 years. But man, that's um, woo. uh, it's a fun ride. Okay, I take her to all the little concerts. I take her all these tribute concerts, and I tell her these are all of the things that I didn't do with you back in the day that you weren't able to go do with me because I was somewhere else. But I also explained to her that this is divine intervention, that where we are in our relationship, because it probably would have killed everything if we, now is the time. Timing is everything. Now is the time for our relationship, and not then. Because I needed to grow up. So hopefully she's dating an adult. Okay, but I'm hoping that. But I'd like to be childlike at times. I like to be young in heart and childlike, not childish. But we have the same interests, and we like to go watch music. And we're going to go see Tom Jones tonight. I had never seen him before. That was my grandmother's idol, Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. So we're gonna go see Tom Jones, and we had tickets for Jason Bonham at the same time, but I gave those to a friend of mine, and so we're gonna see Tom Jones. But we have a love of music, and we share that, and we're sharing a lot more things now. And I think 3 years into our relationship, we're still learning about each other, and I'm glad that she didn't stay on vacation, that she came back and wanted to try. And it's not always easy. I know I have my stubbornness too. It's still there. I'm still stubborn. She always follows me into the kitchen when I'm in the kitchen, though. That's so, but I think it's, for me, well, I don't even think, I already know that it's probably a way different relationship than I've had in my whole life. She has her independence, and I have mine. And so when I don't really depend on her, but I want her. Okay, there's a difference. I don't think she depends on me. I'm hoping she wants me. So wants to be with me, and that's kind of important. That's a different dynamic than wounds coming together and forcing each other in our relationships, or forcing things to work, and my way or the highway kind of thing. And it's a give and take, and I try to surrender when I can, and I try not to always be right. I let her be right all the time. So that's kind of where my relationship is with her right now, and I love her more and more every day. She's a wonderful person, and she has her stuff, and she has her disappointments and her hurt and her wounds, and hopefully I could just be there for her, for her to walk through her stuff. This is the second time she's heard me speak, so I guess the third will be at our conference, right? So we do have a conference coming up on March 3rd. So, so like, I'm in a relationship that, like, this is new territory for me. And I'm, I have to say I'm sorry when I'm wrong. And I do. I say I'm sorry. And one of the things is that I have a voice that, and my daughter told me this, but I have a voice that I'll say things and it sound like somebody's mad at you. Okay. And that's just how I've always been. That's how I've always spoke. And, my daughter brought it up to me. She says, Dad, you need to change your tone. You need to, because this is what it sounds like, and she pointed it out because I was talking to the dog. And I said, oh, well, you're a good boy or whatever. She goes, Dad, it sounds like he's in trouble, and you got to kind of elevate, change your voice. And, like, you're a good boy, that kind of stuff where, so I have to be more conscious of that when I am speaking. Okay. Because it makes it, I'm not conscious of it because this is how I am, but I understand now. So I have to be conscious of things when I'm engaging in other people, what I am, what's my mannerisms and how am I speaking and what's my tone. So, there's new things for me to learn, and I welcome that. I want to learn. I want to be better. I want to be in a relationship. I want to be available. I want to have somebody. I want to have somebody in my life that that's an equal part of this relationship, not just a trophy or that kind of thing. I'm learning to have a different relationship than my parents have, and I'm pretty sure she is too. But I was actually her dad's paper boy, and he liked his paper a certain way, on the porch, facing the letters facing up. At when you open the door, you can see it right there in the middle of the mat. He had to have it that way. He was a good tipper too, so he was good about that. So, but he read the newspaper religiously every day, even till the day he passed away. He liked his paper. So I was at her house, and we had just seen him the night before for dinner. And that's the first time I've seen him in years, because we had COVID and we haven't been able to see him. So I hadn't seen him since I was his paper boy. But I had been talking with him on the phone. I'd be at her house and he'd be calling her, and then he'd want to talk to me. So he called one night and he said, he called and she gives me the phone. She goes, he wants to talk to you. And so we're talking, and we started talking. We talked about a little bit of baseball, golf, and then he says, well, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah, sure. What's going on? He said, do you love my daughter? I said, yeah, Steve, I love your daughter, but she's a lot of work. And he laughed at me, and he said, I know. And so, I just wanted to know. He says, I'm a dad. I wanted to know. And I said, I understand. I said, I'm only here, and I'm in good faith, and to do my best. So, and that was the last conversation I had with him, and he passed away a few days later. And he had no responsibility to me. So he gave me his daughter. He said, okay, here, it's your turn now. So I'm trying to do my best for you, Steve. I'm going to do my best for her and you. See what we can do. But it's a different relationship, again, like I said, than I've ever had. I don't want her to be afraid of me, even though there's times when she were afraid of me when I said things and I talked about things. And I'll talk about one thing. I'll how to talk about that kind of something happened with us. My tone again was not right, but I'll give you an example. I found this turtle, and I had got some cucumbers for this turtle, and I just bought them like the day before, and then we were going to the store, and we were going to go to the taco truck and get some tacos, and then she said, "Oh, we need to get some cucumbers too," because I threw the cucumbers away, and I went, "What? I just bought those cucumbers," and I could see her shrink and just diminish, and she kind of like retreated. I was like, I just bought those the other day, and I go, how can they be bad? And then I went inside, and whenever I got what I want, and I came back out, and she was dead silent. Okay. And it was a silent ride to the taco truck and a silent ride back home. And then when we got home, so now I'd ask her what's going on and she wasn't saying anything. So then when we got home, I said, okay, you need to tell me what's going on, because I'm not going to sit here with this silence, and I can't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And so she silenced some more, and then she came back and she said, okay, here's what I got. Here's what I'm going to tell you. And here's what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And so she started telling me all of what she has been through, and, yelling that I was yelling and that I did this, and it scared her, and it reminded her of this. And so, okay. So at the one point, then I kind of raised my voice and I stopped it. And I said, okay, well, I kind of lost my cool a little bit, which I was sorry for, and I apologized. But what came down to it is I had to tell her why I was so upset at that time right now, not before. I explained to her I was sorry about raising my voice, and I didn't realize that I was raising my voice. I was only raising a question that I had just bought these cucumbers, and it's about cucumbers. It's not about anything else, right? And maybe my voice sounded like that, but I triggered her, and I didn't mean to, and I apologize for that part of it. And that's not what I was not upset with her about that. Okay. And then, but I did have to tell her why I was really upset was because in my life as a child, in my relationships with my other spouses, the quiet, deafening silence of that, what do we call that? I don't know. It's the deafening silence, the silent treatment. And that was a huge trigger. That's always been a huge trigger for me. And so I had to tell her that I felt so uncomfortable. All these triggers were coming off of me because of that. And she understood that.
So we didn't know how to get there. So actually we kind of learned how to mutually get there. And it was kind of, now we understand. I think we are now at a level where we realize we can start asking questions of each other, but it's ourselves it's more ourselves stopping us from doing that, but it's invited. I'm okay with that. And that's kind of where our relationship is right now. And that's kind of basically what I got. So I'm open for questions. That's good. I'm good for that. Okay. Well, my dad passed away. That been a year and a half ago, I think. Yeah. And he had Alzheimer's in the end. And so that's kind of why I'm spending time with him. But I got to understand him, and that he grew up in a different era, and there was different things put on him. So I was able to understand him and to just love him for who he is. The other part you had asked about, you wanted to tell your dad certain things or whatever. I don't think that has to do with being a dad. I think it has to do with myself being, knowing that I'm an adult now and that I can say what I want to, but I need to be respectful and kind, and I need to say what I need to help myself. So I think actually the conversation that I gave you about me and my girlfriend at the end, where we both were basically afraid to get our points across, that once we finally got over what we thought, we actually got to the core of what we really needed to hear. So if I'm not being the adult and I'm not saying, instead of attacking, just saying, well, this is what I need, because the vulnerability part of that is what stops me. Because I don't want them to see me vulnerable, or I stop myself because I feel like the child. And reality is we're all grown up now. I'm my mom's equal, I'm my dad's equal. So I don't know if that helps you any, but I think if you address it in a point to where, Dad, this is how I feel, and you're the person that you are now, and maybe he had something to do with that, and maybe not. but I know that probably somewhere along the line, maybe he did help. And maybe you can look at the positive parts of that and maybe just thank him for that. You know, that's what I have to look at. Yes, I'm learning now, but you know, the more you work on yourself, is the more you see in others. So that's kind of a given. But I like to look at it as a learning experience. So you're going to learn what you don't want, and you're going to learn to recognize right away what you don't want, and it's not going to work. And it's okay to say, I don't think this is going to work for me, or I don't, you know, I'm not attractive or whatever. You know, not hurting feelings or anything like that. Just you just have, you know, this is your life, and this is something that you're going to do in life that's important to you. So you don't want to settle for anything. So I just think that there's a lot of phony people out in the world, and they're going to advertise themselves, and they're not going to be true and honest. So, you know, you're going to find that eventually, but you got to weed through that all, or, you know, it's just the process too, to find the right person. Yeah. The most uncomfortable part of that is actually setting boundaries, doing that, especially when it's somebody new, setting that boundary. But it's important to do that. Okay, because if I don't do that, I don't find out more about what I need to know. Then I'm just leaving, and then that's basically, you know, you have to ask for what you want and what your needs are. So for me, in the beginning, it's verbalizing what I need or what I'm expecting, what I want, and basically, I say that for me,
the most important part of that relationship is the relationship, not the sexual part. So it's not the sexual part of the relationship. It is the relationship. Okay. So I have to make sure that I'm clear on that. Okay. And that's my boundary. The other part, that part is going to be secondary. And then I have to have the relationship to know that I want to have the other part of that. And I have to make that clear as well, you know, because I think I said it in the beginning. If you're a love addict, then you get into the, you know, you get into it, and you get intimacy right away, or you have sexual encounter right away, and then you're left with a lot of uncertain answers or expectations, and then I have that self-talk like, oh my God, we did it. Now what? Now what's going to happen here? And you know, I spin out in my own head about what that's going to be. Instead of developing that relationship. So that's kind of how I would you have to make yourself clear in the beginning that I am looking for a relationship. Okay. The other part of it, the relationship will develop into whether you're going to understand what you like sexually or not like sexually, or what you're willing to do or not do. And then you can decide, is that going to work for you? Okay, most of us get in that relationship. We have sex first, and then we figure like, oh, well, I don't know if I like that, or if I'm going to like this, and then you got to figure out how to set boundaries then, rather than setting boundaries in the beginning. That's kind of what I got for you on that. Oh, well, I did a lot of inner child work, and you kind of keyed in on a few things, and so. My sexuality and my sex life, I guess, in my relationships. So, you know, there a few things can happen in that from being a survivor. You can either be sexually anorexic, or you can be promiscuous. Okay. And then to have the middle part of that, well, I need to really learn how to have boundaries. I really have to have acceptance of myself and learn about myself and like myself, and be okay with myself before I can actually be okay with somebody else. So you kind of had brought that up, and I wanted to kind of to clear that up. My inner child work I actually started really early on, and I've done a lot of different levels of that inner child work. Sometimes we still do it, but I feel a little bit different about it now. But I did one of the workshop with John Bradshaw I did with the inner child, and it was the father wound. Is basically, this is the, you know, the topic is what we learned about. how to acknowledge the inner child. He did a guided meditation, and you had to visualize yourself as a child, and then see, and then it progressed from there. But there's a lot of different techniques to really work on your inner child, and a lot of different people who are pretty good at it. But acknowledging it as first is really huge. You got to acknowledge that this is my child, and this is the adult part of me, and I have to be okay with both of them for me to coexist. It can't be one rule and the other. I have to coexist now. So that's kind of where I'm at in that, is that I can let the child out and play whenever I want to. So it's okay. So I hope that's kind of that could be I answered your question for you on that. Well, I hope you're feeling better. The commitment actually begins with me and my comfortability with myself. The situation you kind of describe right now, I would probably be really feeling a lot of abandonment stuff. And my abandonment issues probably wouldn't be about the person that I'm with, even though it's your long-term relationship, but it's usually you've probably experienced that before. And it's not always a good feeling. It's really a horrible feeling to be abandoned. So I'm sorry that's happening. The acceptance for me, and then learning how to have long-term commitment. It is actually that I have to be okay with where I'm at and what I'm doing. I can't be putting in, if I have a partner, that's my equal partner, and now I have to learn how to negotiate what I want or I don't want. But you can't negotiate with somebody that wants to leave. Okay, that's for one. You got to let that go, and that's sad. But if I'm hanging on to that stuff, I can't really find what I need. And my sponsor tells me that's letting somebody live rent free in your head, and then you can't move forward because it's occupied. So I'm really sorry that that's happening. That's not on you. That's actually on the person. For whatever his reason is, you said that he doesn't want to be committed. So I think you would treat yourself the way you feel you should be treated, and move forward. I'm 63 and I'm just been in a relationship for 3 years now, so it's not impossible to find somebody to love and to be a part of a relationship with. But you got to be honest with yourself, and that's the hardest part. That's okay. Well, I'm glad you brought up the one thing. This is not male or female, okay? This is both, because I've married a lot of rageful women in my life, okay? And I didn't know it. It's behaviors. It's behavioral activities that we learn because we're human beings, I always say, well, if you put a child with a family of apes, that's going to act like an ape, okay? This is what we do. This is how we learn stuff. And that's kind of a simple analogy that I like. So, I have to tell you, the first part of that is recognizing the own rage in yourself. So we have levels of rage, and our rage might be silent and we might be waiting for it. But I have it. And then sometimes when I have that, I'm attracting that. So that's probably the self-awareness of why do I attract that. And I know the energies, I attract energies of wounded people, wounded women. That's my energy. It's familiar and I recognize it and I see it now. But if I'm not recognizing it, I'm always running into that same thing and asking myself the same question: why do I always get these? Why do I always get this? And the reason why is because I'm not working on that level of my own self. So if I'm not working on it, I don't see it. And so that's kind of even though I don't think I have it, I do have it. I do have it in that it might come out different. It might not be rage, and it might not look like rage, but it could be a passive kind of a rage, and it could be passive in my own mannerisms that this is what I'm projecting, so this is what I'm attracting. So, and I know that's true for me. That's why I say I've married plenty of rageful women, and the reason why is because of my own rage. So I have to kind of look in my own self. So when I'm taking care of myself, I find healthier people, and I'm able to set boundaries to say, wait a minute, that's kind of scary, or you can recognize it and set a boundary right away, so that brings out that topic right up, and then it's not out and it's not hidden anymore, so you can deal with it. So that's kind of what I got.